Hi, everyone. Welcome to our March Research Showcase. My name is Kenneth Gordon. I'm the lead research community officer on the WMF research team. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Our showcases are meant to recognize and share recent research on or relevant to the Wikimedia project. And we have a very exciting theme for you all today. For those of you that are joining us live, for those that are new and don't know this yet, we welcome you to ask questions of the speakers in the YouTube chat. We are already monitoring these channels. If you want to write hi and where you're from, you're welcome to. And we will, during the Q&A session, pass your questions on to the speakers. We kindly ask that all attendees watching us today follow the friendly space policy and the Universal Code of Conduct. Before we get started, I have just two short but exciting announcements. The first one is that we've launched this year's round of the Research Fund. We've made some significant changes to the fund this year in an effort to improve our impact and in line with learnings from previous years. The deadline to submit proposals is April 16th, and we will now be sharing the link to the meta page in chat, so please visit that page and apply and submit your proposals. Secondly, members of our team in coordinations with others at the Wikimedia Foundation and an external collaborator have recently published a preprint on research and privacy on Wikipedia. We are actively looking for feedback and comments through July 1st, 2025. If you'd like to chime in, the paper is available as an OSF preprint, and directions on how to provide feedback can be found on Meta, and we will share that link in the chat as well. I will now pass it over to my colleague Eli, who will introduce the theme and speakers for this month.
Yeah, thanks, Kinneret. I'm Eli, a researcher at the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm glad to introduce the March 2025 Research Showcase. Today, in celebration of Women's History Month in many parts of the world, we will feature work on gender gaps. Gender gaps can show up in a number of ways on Wikimedia projects and include imbalances in not only who edits Wikipedia language editions, but also inequalities in terms of who's represented in article and image content on the projects. For today's showcase, we wanted to continue to highlight research work on this topic, but also opt to focus on applied efforts aimed at closing these gender gaps. Today, first we'll hear from Douglas Gilbo, a professor of organizational behavior at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, on the topic of online images and gender bias. Following, we'll hear about two ongoing Wikimedia Foundation Research Fund projects related to this month's topic. First, Riham Al-Tamime, a researcher at the University of Strathclyde, will speak about a project aimed at addressing Wikipedia's gender gaps through social media ads. And secondly, Tina Chen, a senior research assistant and PhD researcher from the University of Queensland, Australia, will provide updates about measuring the gender gap, an attribute-based class completeness estimation. Without further ado, let me introduce today's first speaker. Douglas Gilbo is a professor of organizational behavior at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. As co-director of the Computational Culture Lab, Douglas harnesses and builds computationally intensive network and language-based methods to study how cultures emerge and evolve. His work has appeared in a number of top journals, including Nature, the Proceedings of the National Academy of the Sciences, and Management Science, as well as in popular news outlets, such as The Atlantic, Wired, and the Harvard Business Review. He has received top research awards from the International Conference on Computational Social Science, the Cognitive Science Society, and the International Communication Association. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Douglas.
Thank you so much for having me here. Get my slides started. Okay, yeah, it's such a delight to be with you all. I'm a huge fan of Wikipedia. It's a big honor to share this research. So I'll be focusing on how the gender gap is larger in terms of what we can measure online. It's larger in images compared to text. And I'll explain a bit about why. We focus on comparing image and text data from Google and Wikipedia. And I want to start by saying this, when we identify gender gaps on these platforms, in particular Wikipedia, this has much less to do with Wikipedia being particularly problematic in this regard with respect to the broader internet. It has a lot more to do with the fact that Wikipedia's data is so publicly available for researchers to study, which is an invaluable resource for allowing us to get insights into broader cultural trends. So thank you so much to the broader Wikimedia Foundation and Wikipedia community for providing such a valuable service to the computational social science community. So this paper was published earlier last year in Nature for those who want to follow up and read more. And I want to share that this research would not have been possible if it wasn't for this amazing team. This is a very interdisciplinary effort. Solène Delacour from the Business School at Haas, other collaborators from, say, Ethan Nadler, UCSD, Tasker Hall, and other Bhargav and Mark Chu. I'm very grateful for their contributions to this paper. So I want to start by giving a bit of context for the motivation of this project. And if we think about our moment in history, it's actually a feature of sort of recent philosophical thinking and social scientific thinking for there to be this intense emphasis on textual data as the primary way that humans express themselves, manifest culture, and for the way that social scientists study culture. And that's why you see quotes like this from the famous philosopher Jacques Derrida, there's nothing outside the text. Now, you might think maybe we have moved beyond this way of thinking, but I want to bring to your attention, if you think about the conversations around large language models, in particular when some of the GPT models were initially introduced, there were active conversations about whether these models are becoming conscious. Now, interestingly, in the initial versions of these models, they were trained entirely on textual data. So the fact that this conversation gained such widespread prominence really raised the fact that many of us are considering whether it's possible to meaningfully reproduce something around human consciousness and human culture just from textual data alone. Now, what motivated this project as we saw all of these trends was this was puzzling in the sense that one of the largest scale cultural shifts of communication that we have seen over the last several decades is this huge shift towards visual communication. So if you look at, say, the number of images and videos online that has skyrocketed in the last decade or two, people also are spending less time reading on average and more time consuming this visual content. There's some recent data from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences that documents this in large nationally representative samples. We see this trend also if we look at news agencies and advertisers that are increasingly using images to grab people's attention online. They prove to be particularly good at doing that. So I'll say a bit about the implications that has. And then if we just look at the raw usage statistics, we see that millions of images and videos are downloaded from platforms like Google, Twitter, now X, and Wikipedia very frequently. And this is not even to mention the rise of almost entirely hypervisual social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram that consist almost entirely of image-based communication. Now, what I want to argue today is that this shift from text to images actually has large-scale implications for something like the gender gap based on how images shape the way stereotypes are represented. And this gets us toward a visual perspective on gender bias. So if you look at recent studies, so computational social science has made a lot of progress in the recent decade and so by being able to study large amounts of textual data online using algorithmic techniques. And some really breakthrough studies have looked at the frequency of gender bias in terms of stereotypical language on textual data from the internet and finding consistently these trends that gender bias has been decreasing. However, if you think about the way that gender is expressed in textual communication, it's not clear that these trends are going to generalize to other modalities. There are ways in which we can change our messages in the textual modality to actually minimize gender bias. And this can be through, for example, the use of gender-neutral pronouns, or even by omitting any explicit information about gender. So say you're going to talk about a doctor and you say the doctor administered the test, the sentence itself doesn't say anything explicit about the doctor. Now, the recipient of that message might have certain assumptions, but you're leaving it up to the recipient, and it's not something that you've communicated directly. Now, if we think about something like images, the luxury of that sort of communicative strategy is much less available when we think of images that are used to depict people in occupations and related social categories. And this is because we are forced to have a concrete representation. So you can think of the images of these doctors here, where in a sense, you're no longer leaving it up to the viewer or the recipient what demographic information they actually associate with the particular doctor. Instead, you're actually giving them a very specific representation of the doctor. And this can be true even if it's not your intention. It's not like you're trying to say something about the demographic of the doctor, but the images contain that information in a way that it may not be nearly as readily available or present in the textual modality. So in this sense, a simple shift from text to images actually means shifting toward a way of communicating where the availability of demographic information is going to be much more tightly coupled to the way that we actually represent people in these social categories. Now, if we think about the broader consequences of this, it actually turns out if you go back to the very origins of when photography and pictures were becoming widely produced and available, forward-thinking folks at the time were noticing that this was probably going to have large-scale consequences for something like stereotypes. So the famous abolitionist and orator Frederick Douglass, who's actually known to be the most photographed African American of the time, he gave a series of lectures, one of them called Pictures in Progress, where he had a number of astute insights into how the shift towards images was actually going to have pretty significant implications for stereotypes. And this quote in particular struck me. So he says, "The great cheapness and universality of pictures must exert a powerful though silent influence upon the ideas and sentiment of present and future generations." Now, first, if we think about something like the great cheapness and universality of the pictures, that has exploded by orders of magnitude when we think about how these things are spreading on the internet. But also what I find really striking is he has a very subtle insight around cognitive science where he uses the term silent influence. And this has actually been borne out by recent research in cognitive science because it turns out images have this special balance of being both very powerful in terms of how they activate psychological responses, but they do so very quickly in a way that's actually often implicit, we don't even realize. So lots of research shows that we categorize the world both through words and images, but there's a field called embodied cognition, which actually shows when people are reading text, if you scan their brains while they're reading text, the brain is actually activating all kinds of mental imagery. And an increasing number of studies suggest that this is actually instrumental to how we understand the meaning of sentences altogether. In fact, some go so far as to argue that the first forms of meaning in human cognition developed in an image-based way, and then later forms of communication, including text, then build upon that, and that's why they rely on this image-based way of thinking under the hood. Now, this has interesting implications when we think about how powerful images can be. So there is this known effect called the picture superiority effect, which is a body of work that frequently compares images and text and their ability to communicate messages in influential ways. And it finds that images are consistently processed more quickly and memorably, and also they're more emotionally evocative than words. Of course, we know the popular phrase, images are worth 1,000 words, but more generally, what this is trying to tell us is that there's an enormous amount of information that can be communicated very quickly through an image. So images are especially salient and sticky. One example I like to give is, as a personal version of this is some of you may have, say, read the Harry Potter books well before the movies, and at that time you had your own personal image of what Harry Potter looked like, right? But then once you actually watch the Harry Potter movies and you see Daniel Radcliffe, now your version of Harry Potter forever looks like Daniel Radcliffe. It has taken over your mental image, right? And so this is the way in which images and video content can be very sticky. But now this has big implications when we think about stereotypes because we're moving toward a way of communicating when the demographics that we are signaling in the representation of social categories can be particularly sticky in a way that may not be nearly as salient in text. So this got us to two hypotheses that we really explored in our study. So the first is that actually gender bias is going to be more prevalent in online images compared to online text. And it has to do with, again, the strength of that coupling of the availability of gender information and the representation of a social category in images. The second is that when encountering content online, if you encounter it in images, we expect that it's actually going to activate gender bias in people's beliefs more strongly than if you encounter textual information about social categories. And we're going to focus on two examples. One is an exaggeration within categories. So say the extent to which a category might be female typed like nurse, we're going to say it's going to be even more female typed in images compared to text. And then if we zoom out and look across a bunch of categories, there's also evidence that men are just overrepresented online in general, and we're going to argue that that's actually going to be stronger in images as well. So just very quickly, because it's a short talk, I'm going to give you an overview of the methods. So basically, I won't get into all the details, but we compile a unique combination of over 1 million images across platforms. And we collected our own over 700,000 images from Google mapped to essentially all social categories that we could retrieve from existing data sets. So this includes occupations, but also everyday social roles like friend and colleague. So over 3,000 of those. And then we also analyzed the association of images to these categories in the Wikipedia image text data set. We were able to get around over 20,000 images mapped to over 1,000 social categories. And we examined a couple other image data sets that I won't have time to go into today. But what we can do is then compare this to large bodies of textual data, often in the orders of billions of words. And we do this through word embedding models, which I'll say a little bit about, but largely we use this from a large language model trained on Google News, also a recent sample of news, also a series of language models trained on Wikipedia data. And what we can do is extract the level of gender bias we see in these textual formats compared to images, and this is where we are able to build our comparisons. So what we do is we extract images online, and then we map them to social categories, and then we recruit thousands of people to actually categorize the faces in the images. We also replicate this with machine learning classifications, but we focus on humans' perceptions because we're interested in the actual psychological reality of how people perceive this content online and how it impacts them. And then what we can do is take categories and sort them in terms of when you look at the faces that appear with this category online, is it mostly male or mostly female faces? So the 1 means that it's 100% male faces, -1 means 100% female faces, and in the middle is a 50-50 balance. Now, what we can do in text is do something similar, and what these word embedding models do is they represent words in a high dimensional space based on the similarities of the other words they co-occur with. So in other words, it shows up similar ways in which these words are used in everyday communication. So you might see two words like success and achieve being really close to each other because they have similar meanings. They show up in similar contexts. But a word like cloud will be far apart in this space from like a word like achieve because they just tend to occupy very different contexts when we're communicating about different topics. And we use a method called the geometry of culture. I won't go into the details, but what you can do is identify these demographic dimensions in the space and then actually position categories along them. So by identifying a region of this embedding space that say, in this example, they're looking at class. So you have concepts related to poor and poverty and concepts relating to rich and affluence. And by looking at where categories fall between these different regions of this embedding space, you can actually pick up on stereotypes. So they show that things like boxing and weightlifting are closer to the poor region of this demographic continuum, whereas golf and tennis are associated with the more affluent side of the continuum. And what we do is we adapt this to gender. So we use their approach and we can use this to aggregate large amounts of text data to basically get a sense of which categories are more associated with male semantic context or female semantic context along a similar -1-to-1 continuum. We replicate this with all different kinds of methods. It doesn't require a word embedding approach, but what's nice about a word embedding approach is it allows us to aggregate massive amounts of language data and make them comparable to image data. So I'm going to show some of the results focusing on Google Images and Google Text, and I'll tell you a little bit about how this replicates with Wikipedia. But the first thing I want to say is if we look at the gender association between Google Images and Google Text, we see that there's a very strong correlation, which tells us that they're picking up on similar stereotypical structures in terms of which gender particular categories are associated with. But the first hypothesis was something of demographic amplification in terms of the specific gender association of the category. What this figure is telling you is when a category is male typed, like something like carpenter, it's significantly more male in images compared to text. And we see the same thing when a category is female typed, like nurse. The extent to which it's associated with women is significantly higher in Google Images compared to Google Text. Now, what this does is it zooms out and it looks at the whole distribution in the terms of gender association across all images and text. And you can see the result from before where the tails, the extremes of the image distribution are stronger for images and text. But what the vertical lines are showing you is actually the average. And what you see is, as well, there is a much stronger skew towards male representation in the images compared to text. In fact, something like 65% of the categories in images are more likely to show up with men than women, which is a very strong statistical bias towards male overrepresentation. Whereas the text modality, while it's slightly skewed male, it's actually generally fairly neutral in terms of its associations. Then what we can do is compare this against what you could call ground truth. So we get humans to actually rate the genders they associate with the categories. That's what you're seeing on the left panel. And what you see is actually, while it's both images and text are highly correlated with human judgments, the images are significantly showing a stronger male bias than even people's judgments, whereas texts are actually showing a weaker bias. If we look at occupations, we match this to census data and we look at the rate at men and women in these different occupations. What you see is for the 685 occupations we can match, we do see a slight bias towards male representation in the census, but the images show a significantly stronger bias towards male representation, whereas a textual representation of these same occupations basically shows no gender skew at all. It's showing a neutral gender representation. So what this is telling us is not just that the bias is stronger in images compared to text, but the images are actually amplifying the bias that we might see in the social world. So it's a kind of social construction of a gender bias that's emerging online. We have actually replicated this on Wikipedia using the Wikipedia image text data set, which is made publicly available as a hugely valuable resource. And generally, it gets you a handful of images for a given concept based on the images as a part of the page. And on average, this gets us about 15 faces for across 1,244 social categories. And what this is showing you is that the same results hold. So this is comparing against a glove model that's trained on the entire English Wikipedia text, and we're looking at the English Wikipedia images as well. And the different versions of this in terms of the 50, 100, and 200D are just the amount of dimensionality given in the model, the text model. And what you see is across all these models, the extent to which a category is associated with men is significantly higher in images compared to all text models. And then what the density distributions are showing you is the overall strength of gender association, man or woman. And it's also showing that there's a significantly stronger just overall stereotyping in the images compared to the text models. We've also gone on to analyze the IMDb Wikipedia dataset, which is a canonical training dataset for computer vision. And this actually provides ground truth data on the actual gender of people looking at celebrities. And then what we can show is the same effect. So if you look at celebrities on IMDb and Wikipedia, we see a significant skew towards male representation. And the strength of that is even stronger, not only compared to text models, the association of celebrity, but even to census data, which doesn't show much of a gender bias at all. So I want to quickly conclude by saying that this actually does impact people psychologically when they encounter this content. So we ran an experiment where we asked people to search for descriptions of occupations online, and they did so for around 20 occupations from a set of 54. After they uploaded a description, we had them indicate which gender they are most associated with this given category using the same -1-to-1 slider. In the text condition, they were randomized to look at Google News and find a textual description of the category. In the image condition, they went to Google Images and were asked to upload an image condition, an image description. In the control condition, they were asked to search for basically random categories like Apple or guitar that had no relationship to the actual category, but then they would go and evaluate the category and give their gender association. So basically, they had the same behavioral task. It took roughly the same amount of time. It's just that the content they were encountering online wasn't directly related to the categories that they were rating the gender for. And this was a nationally representative sample of the US. What we see is the overall extent to which the descriptions people uploaded were gendered, so how stereotyped the content was. It was much stronger in images compared to text, which is what we would expect. But then we can look at the overall strength of gender association that people indicated using that slider. what we see is in the text condition, there's no difference from control. So basically, the text had no effect on the psychology of internet users relative to the control condition. But in the image condition, it's significantly intensified. So people are indicating stronger male and female associations compared to both the text and the control condition. We also show that this appears in people's measurements of their implicit bias. I won't have time to get into that, but there's lots of other ways in which this appears to impact people's psychology, and our measures show that it lasted for a couple days, so it wasn't just a temporary effect. And this is another plot indicating that there was a direct relationship between the gender of the content that people uploaded and their associations, and even the overall strength of that association. So more stereotypical content online led to stronger biased activations in people's psychologies. So the key takeaways from our argument is that the gender gap is larger and more powerful in online images. This means that we should evaluate narratives of progress toward gender equality with caution, that what we observe in the text modality doesn't necessarily generalize to the other modalities. Now, in ongoing work, we're showing that the biases in these public data sets can propagate through mainstream AI algorithms like search engines and large language models, which are trained on these large data sets, Wikipedia being a prominent example. And this poses risks in terms of we think about the text-to-image generating models, which are increasingly popular because they're just further accelerating the production and spread of online images. And I just want to conclude that in the new direction we're going in, as we increasingly study large language models that are based on Wikipedia data, these are powerful new tools for getting insights into our culture that we never had available. This is what makes Wikipedia such a valuable resource, that we can learn about human cognition and psychology through this large data. But this is also what makes it so alarming and important to observe these social biases that we can discover about ourselves that are then getting propagated into our algorithms, which then feed back into our own psychologies based on the content we encounter online. So thank you so much for your time and attention. It's really been an honor, and I look forward to questions and comments. And if you want to follow up and contact me, here's my email. And once again, such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation, Douglas. I'm going to pause here a moment to see if Diego has anything he needs to relay from YouTube.
Nothing yet. There's several comments thanking for the presentation and saying that it's very interesting, but no questions so far.
Thanks, Diego. We'll also open it up to folks in the room. Please raise a hand or let us know in chat if you have any questions. And while we're waiting,
go ahead, Eli.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, when this paper was published, as a kudos to the Wikipedia community, there was a chat among a thread of Wikipedia editors where someone read our paper and noticed that the picture on the Wikipedia page of mechanic was of men, and they updated it and showed a picture of a woman, and then wrote a little bit about how, like, actually during World War II, all the mechanics were women because the men were at war, and this was not actually represented. So I thought that was so cool that the Wikipedia community immediately responded and started actually incorporating this insight into their platform. So I thought I would share that while folks were thinking about questions.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's always cool to see results translate into some sort of action, right? In this case, a very specific one. Diego, is there a question you want to relay?
Yes, we have one question from Nicholas. Nicholas is asking about other type of media like videos or drawings. So he says that presentation has been about images, mostly photos. So what about other medias like videos or drawings? If you have any reflection about that, please.
Yeah, so quickly, in ongoing work we actually have under R&R, so it might be published soon, knock on wood. We actually replicate some of these findings in videos, because videos, of course, are increasingly popular. They're harder to work with, but we figured out ways of doing it, and it turns out the same effects hold. And so this is concerning also because videos are even more attention absorbing, right? So the cognitive consequences are there. But regarding images and drawing, I'll just quickly say all of our results also replicate with these more fictionalized or abstract representations. And there's even evidence to suggest that they might be stronger, because when we are fictionalizing the social world, that's where our imagination and biases can actually exaggerate, say, what we think is the ideal representation of a person. And this shows up also in stock photography, which it's not really photography of real people, it's photography of sort of like fictionalized representations of what you think a firefighter should look like. And so in some ways, our results aren't only about pictures of the quote unquote real world, they're also about our own imagination. And when we think about visualizing like idealized kinds of people, and the biases equally show up there. And I think that's a fascinating direction for future research.
Eli, yeah, there is one comment here, and if you can reflect about it. So the result that you show were considering women and men. What about non-binary representations? Can you
Yeah,
reflect a bit about
absolutely.
that?
So we allowed people to classify the images based on non-binary. We were very interested in that. Of course, we don't mean to suggest that gender is intrinsically a binary structure. It's a very complex continuum. We found that only around 2% of cases did people use the category non-binary, and it made it difficult to get a representative sample. And also the word embedding framework that we were comparing against, because we really wanted to use our image data to compare against the existing textual methods that had been developed, they basically assumed and apply a binary gender representation. So we wanted to plug into that, and it made some of the statistics work. But in the future, we're very interested in thinking about how to represent these more complex continua, which is also, by the way, just as relevant for something like ethnicity, which is a much more multidimensional, intersectional form of representation. And so in our ongoing work, we're going into these intersectional domains, looking at the interactions between multiple continuum. That's actually the R&R I was referring to earlier. So we're hopeful that this will help set the groundwork for those inquiries moving forward. Thank you.
I'm just looking around the room to see if we have anybody who wants to jump in with a question. If not, I sort of have one of my own I can ask here. Douglas, I was a little bit curious about, I was thinking about like sort of the way that images make their way into associations with Wikipedia articles.
Mm.
And there's, of course, like a licensing restriction, right? In terms of what articles can appear with articles, what images can appear with articles. Have you done any like breakdowns according to the licensing of images to see if some of these trends are sort of stronger, weaker, the same, or do you have any thoughts on that?
So it's very interesting. A couple things. So we haven't looked at licensing. That would be a fascinating analysis. There'd be a lot of data wrangling to figure out there. But we have looked at like the sources of images from Google, where like what are the websites, and we actually see, because initially we were wondering, is this a lot of stock photography? But we were actually surprised that while that was definitely a prominent source, it wasn't in the top three. We actually saw a lot of people's personal blogs or corporate websites where sometimes they use stock photography, but sometimes they're taking their own photography. I'm not sure exactly what the licensing is there, but we did see that the signal was fairly consistent across all of these different sources. And a part of that is I think it just stems from the statistical argument, right? Which is so long as you're providing an image representation of a person, the availability of demographic information is more present than in text. And it's worth noting that this doesn't necessarily always mean it's going to skew towards something like male overrepresentation, because if there's a bias in selection, it's just going to amplify that. So there was this really cool study that came out shortly after ours, which looked at children's fiction and found that there is actually an increased trend towards female representation because they're trying to create more gender equality and empowerment. But consistent with their story, that was actually stronger in images compared to text. And our argument was because whatever is sort of the input bias and a demographic sort of association is just going to be intensified statistically with the images. And one final comment I want to make is that we have since replicated, and other people have done this. These biases also show up in like DALL-E and these algorithm methods just as strongly. And so it's curious whether like is the licensing of the images, what is the data set that they're being trained on? But we can also see that these new images that are entering, which are in somewhat of this ambiguous terrain, are also showing these trends very, very clearly.
Yeah, thanks for the reflection. Yeah, I hadn't considered that last category you mentioned. That's interesting to think about. We might have time for one more question from folks in the room. And Diego, just checking back to see if anything else is coming in from YouTube.
No, no more questions. Again, a lot of congratulations for the presenter. I have a question, if I can go, Eli.
Yeah, absolutely, Diego.
Yes. Do you have access somehow to some longitudinal data that allows you to understand how this has been changing over the time? Because there's a lot of campaigns, editathons trying to close some of these gaps. And you mentioned Glove, that is, I don't know if this has been retrained, but the vectors that we used to download probably now has more like around 9 years. So probably using different embeddings in different points in time, you could try to see how this has evolved. Have you considered some kind of temporal study?
Yeah, I mean that is a holy grail. We would love to do that in images. I think a lot of the text data, it's actually easier to do longitudinally because you can say, look at the whole corpus of Google Books over time, where you can really reliably match a book to, say, its publication date. And when you think about some models like Glove and so forth, they've been used very effectively in this longitudinal sense. And there's some really nice ways that you can look at changes in embedding spaces over time. With images, it's not impossible. It's just tricky because many of these images have only existed on the internet for a little while, and it's hard to know unless they're time-stamped. And most of the time, it's hard to access that time-stamped. You don't know exactly, like, even though the image was uploaded at like 2015, is the image of something in 2015, or is it a black and white image of something in like the 1900s, right? And sometimes it's going to be, you can look at something like black and white and make inferences, but there are also cases where the error margin is pretty high in determining that. So ideally, you would get like a controlled data set, and that's why what was nice around that children's fiction data set is they could look at the images within a book and know the time span of that. There's also a really cool paper that came out in economics around changes in yearbooks photos. It didn't have anything to do with gender bias per se, but it had to do with fluctuations of hairstyle and showing like cultural trends. But we're trying to be creative with the availability of these new data sets to see if we can start getting at longitudinal trends that generalize beyond, say, just the last decade. I'll say one more quick note for those of interest. There's a great Vimeo video. It's called something like every front page of the New York Times since its publication. And it has this really beautiful demonstration of the rise of images, because if you look initially, it was basically all text, and then all of a sudden, like, 70s, 80s, 90s, there's an explosion of images, and then when you get into like the mid 2000s, it's almost entirely images on the front page. So there's lots of examples like that that are promising that we'll be able to pull off some of these longitudinal analyses.
Well, thanks again for the great presentation and this conversation as well, Douglas. Thanks for joining us today. Just keeping my eye on time, I think we'll transition now. Speaking of efforts or sort of evaluating whether or not gender gaps are being closed, that's a great transition to our second half of today's showcase. So with that, let's transition. We'll have two short presentations from our next speakers, followed by a joint Q&A session during which we'll invite questions for either of these speakers from the audience. So let me introduce our next speakers. Our first is Riham Altamime. Riham is a researcher at the University of Strathclyde. She's currently working on projects to address gender gaps on Wikipedia. She holds a PhD in web science from the University of Southampton And Reham's doctoral research focused on exploring editors' reactions to health-related Wikipedia articles during new disease outbreaks. Following, we'll hear from Tianhua Chen, or Tina. Tina is a senior research assistant and PhD researcher from the University of Queensland. Tina has a keen interest in decision-making, information retrieval, information systems, and conceptual modeling. Tina is passionate about leveraging her expertise to explore and contribute to achieving better gender equality on Wikipedia. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Reham.
Hello, everyone. Could you confirm that you can see my slides? Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Riham Al-Tamimi, and today I'm going to present our work on addressing Wikipedia's gender gap through social media ads. The gender gap in Wikipedia is a well-documented issue that have been discussed in multiple forums and in multiple venues. The Wikipedia knowledge gaps is defined as the disparities in content coverage or participation for specific groups of readers or contributors. The contributor dimension of knowledge gaps covers all gaps related to categories of people contributed to Wikimedia sites. Contributors are all individuals who edit or otherwise maintain Wikimedia content. In particular, the gender gap is defined as the difference between individuals of different gender identities in how likely they are to contribute to Wikimedia sites. For example, research has revealed that male Wikimedia editors outnumber their female counterparts, and in fact, women contribute significantly fewer revisions than men. To encourage more contribution to Wikipedia, there were multiple approaches that were taken by multiple organizations, including the Wikimedia Foundation. This includes editathons. These editathons are events. They happen regularly in different parts, geographically in different locations. They could be online as well. They are in different formats, and they contain different tasks for participants, such as encourage them to fact check their Wikipedia content, or encourage them to edit specific articles, or even to educate them about how to use the Wikipedia site and how to edit or maintain content. And also, there are different workshops. They could also be included in editathons initiatives, and also different social media campaigns that talk about the importance of contribution to Wikipedia, and also marketing or raise awareness about different events that were taking place to encourage more contribution to Wikipedia. Appreciating this effort, we thought about more targeted approach, which is to use social media advertisement. So, and how we can use this approach to encourage more contribution. So in general, targeted advertising is a form of advertising, including online advertising that's directed to a specific audience with specific traits based on a product or person that the advertiser is interested in promoting to. And these traits could be demographics, lifestyles, and interests. Targeted advertisement offers so many advantages, such as efficient recruitment. It could offer us a fast and efficient way to reach potential participants, especially from underrepresented or hard-to-reach groups. They also offer us precision targeting because social media platforms have advanced filtering options, allowing researchers who are interested in specific traits such as age, location, and interest and behaviors to utilize these criteria. And also, within this in mind, we could improve sample representativeness and the ability to customize targeting to enhance the recruitment of diverse and more relevant participant pool. And also scalability campaigns could be adjusted in real time to optimize performance and reach a more refined audience as needed. So this is an example of targeted advertisement on LinkedIn. As you can see, this is the LinkedIn campaign manager. The campaign manager have different targeting criteria, such as location and demographics. People or user can have the options to specify or choose different targeting options from the targeting criteria. And based on the options and based on the specifications, the user can retrieve a targeted audience size, which is what we are interested to use and reach through this study. So we started a project as a feasibility test to address Wikipedia's gender gap through LinkedIn ads. The overall goal was to use targeted advertising on LinkedIn to find and contact women who are likely to become Wikipedia editors and who have skills and knowledge in particular topic. In particular, we would like to target women who have skills, for example, in computer science, and ask them to edit Wikipedia articles related to computer science. And the way that we would like to target them is through LinkedIn ads. As a first step, we designed a survey to test the reach of the targeted advertising on LinkedIn. The survey includes multiple constructs, including demographics, expertise, reading Wikipedia articles, and editing Wikipedia articles. In particular, these constructs ask respondents to self-report their expertise and their willingness and frequency to edit or read Wikipedia articles. The second step was launching the survey on LinkedIn ads. As a pre-launch, we have specified the date to be May 2022. The duration was for 1 week. The location was USA, and the gender was a female. And also we included 2 skills, machine learning and Wikipedia. So after 1 week, we tested and we evaluated how we did in the LinkedIn ads. So we aim to target more 1,200 people on LinkedIn. We received a total number of more than 4,900 impressions. Impressions are defined as the people who viewed this ad on LinkedIn. And there were a total of 25 survey website visits. Learning from this project, we have proposed different approaches, and we started building up a build-up projects. We titled it Addressing Wikipedia's Gender Gaps Through Social Media Ads. The overall goal was to test targeted social media advertisement on different platforms to locate and connect with prospective Wikipedia editors, specifically targeting women via survey or via other methods. We expanded the platforms, so we didn't only include LinkedIn, we also would like to include Google, Tumblr, Reddit, and Twitter. We refined the targeting strategy to include more than 1 week. And also, we would like to target the gender. We're interested to target for female, but we also want to compare the targeted groups across different genders. And also, we would like to experiment with skills-based targeting and non-skills-based targeting, which allows us to compare how likely people to respond to our messages if we target them based on skills they have already mastered or skills that they are already interested to contribute to Wikipedia. And also, we designed different messages that have different content, especially content that aim to nudge people to contribute to Wikipedia. And also, we would like to broaden and give different options to participate in the Wikipedia community, whether it is to take a survey or to sign up or to edit a content or to watch a tutorial so people could expose to what is Wikipedia and how to edit content. That's it for my presentation. I would like to thank you, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any question.
Thanks for the great presentation, Riham. As a reminder to folks on YouTube, please do go ahead and start passing along any questions you have for Riham. We're going to transition next to a short presentation from Tina, and then we'll circle back up for a joint Q&A session. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Tina.
Yes, give me 1 second. So, hello everyone, my name is Tianhua and I'm coming from the University of Queensland. And today I will present our three research work on measuring the gender gap. And before I start, I would like to first express my special thanks to the Wikimedia Research Foundation and also for the research team and all of the communities who has been supporting us over the past 2 years. And also I would like to especially thank Gianluca who invited me to join this research project and initiating the research from so many great ideas. And also I would really love to thank Rosie, who has helped us to communicating and connecting with actual communities editors. So those Rosie and Gianluca really helped me and supported me on this project. So we think over the past 2 years, our research team has been working on 3 directions to understanding the gender gap and how to measure it and estimate it. And the first 2 works, we're focusing more on the data side. So we want to discover and any insights we could find from the existing data from Wikidata, Wikipedia, and so we could see how we can measure it, how we can understand the gender gap from the first instance. So this is the first approach. And the last work is more down to earth. So where we talk to the real person, to the Wikimedia editors community, so we could find a better way how we can expose their process, how they balancing the gender during their editing work, and how we can co-design a gender dashboard really could help them during their editing. So those are the 3 research threads we have been working on so far. And today I will present the highlights of each of them. And so feel free to ask me if you have any suggestions and questions. So on the first work, we're focusing on how we can estimating the gender completeness in Wikipedia. And this work has been published in the ACES last year. And from the presentation last year, I remember I received a lot of feedback from the research community on the information system. They gave me very good suggestion on what we could go next. And the reason why we like to understand the estimating the gender completeness in the first place is that by the time when we working on the project, we noticed that, so for instance, by the end of January, we noticed there are more than 14,000 articles has been added each month. And among them, we take a look about the gender distribution, about the persons, the subclasses. And we notice that, for instance, for astronauts, among all of the astronauts, more than 600 astronaut articles, there are only less than 12% is featuring about female astronauts. So we could see that whether there are any way we could estimate how many potential male and female astronauts are there. So based on these small questions, we just consider what our research questions. Is there any better way we can estimate the total count of entities within the specific subclass based on the gender? So we understand gender is non-binary. So in this case, to simplify the analysis, we just consider they are binary, so for easier for statistics analysis. So in other words, we want to understand how many potential male and female entities should be there. So like astronauts, scientists, and teachers. And in order to understand from this approach, we just consider the research methodology from 4 perspectives. First of all, we would like to extract all of the subclasses and entities from the DBpedias. And then, as you can see that all the entities from DBpedia, they don't have the information about the gender. So we would like to estimate based on the information, we predict what are the gender based on the existing data. So in the next step, we will obtain the gender for each entity based on the API functions. And then based on all of the extract Wikipedia edits from the 2019 to 2023, and we partition them into the small windows of 7 days. And then we show what are the insights we can comparing between these 2 data sets, so we can find a way how we can estimate the completeness of genders using the statistical estimators. So to be more detailed, so for instance, in the first step, when we extract the subclasses and entities from the DBpedias, we use some sample queries, like here you can see that. And this is the first step. And secondly, based on the gender, we want to, based on the entities, we would like to predict what are their genders. So on your right-hand side, so this is a distribution of predicted genders across various subclasses under the persons. So we could see coach, academic, artist, scientist. So what has a predicted female and male based on the existing information. And also we notice that there's a lot of data is undefined. So this is also one of the limitations of our current work, because we don't have any ground truth to validate whether this is the accuracy about it. And in the second step, we extract the Wikipedia edits history to estimate gender representations. And as you can see, we're using the window for each window, we calculate the different statistical estimators and its convergence metric. And so that is a detailed approach. And as an insights, you could see that we notice that for male and females, they all have some interesting insights. So for instance, on the top first level, you can see that is for the female representations. Female have some incomplete subclasses, for instance, the engineer, the judge, police officer. So this indicates the gaps where female achievements and presence may be underrepresented. And on the right-hand side, we could see that those are relatively complete subclasses. So for instance, scientists, economists, spy, academic. So those are the places where we find their equally to nearly achieve the near equal visibility and acknowledgments of women's contributions. And on the other side, you could see men, they also have some underrepresented issues. So you can see that on the left-hand side, so the completeness varies widely, ranging from low to moderate levels for those different entities, subclasses. And on the right-hand side, we also notice that these are the more higher levels of completeness for the male representations. So I would say both male and females, we discovered new insights. So what has a more complete subclasses and which are more incomplete subclasses from the data through the data analysis. And so the limitation of our work, we also consider the limitations. For instance, we don't have the ground truth, so this is true. And also the limitations of using the DBpedia and the subclasses of persons may be imperfect. And so future work, we would like to focusing on interview and creating a tool in dashboards. So this leads to towards a third dashboards, a third work of our work. And regarding the second work of our studies, we would like to find out a way whether we can presenting all of the historical trends about the evolution of the gender disparities in Wikipedia articles, and how what are the newest changes about this topic. So this work has been published as a demonstration paper in WWW this year, and we would love to hear more insights from the audience when we're attending the conference. And so basically, as you can see that this paper presents the Wikipedia gender dashboards. So this is a tool designed to enable the interactions with gender distribution data, including the average age in every subclasses of individuals. And also we want to provide the insights so the Wikipedia editors could use it to understand what are the historical trends over the years. And throughout the different data analysis and data processing and then building the dashboards, we develop the dashboards from several stages. So first of all is we're handling the data through the data collection and handling the data qualities. And we're using the different libraries so we can query the DBpedia and Wikidata endpoints. And then we're querying the subclasses for data collection. And then we also access the gender and publication year. So we want to collect them to effectively overcome the limitations about our data set. And as you can see, the data set we collected across from 2001 to 2024. So over the 20 years of data, we could see the historical trend, see what is really going on about the gender disparities. And based on the dashboards we built, we start to do the analysis from the 4 major perspectives. Firstly, we do a comparative analysis of male and female, and then we go into more details to understand the genders and the average reach of the articles published over the years. And we also group them by subclasses and see what are the other trends we can discover from other genders. And so those are the some dashboards we have been built so we can see the interactive and changes over the time. So regarding this work, we have found out several insights. So first of all, we can show that across all of the years, we can see that the proportion of female articles has gradually increased. So this indicates the impact and the efforts made by the whole communities. And then we also notice that despite all of the changes, most subclasses still remain male dominated. So for instance, we consider whether based on all of the insight, we want to provide the dashboards as an approach, so allow the editors could make any informed decisions and whether they want to add more new male persons to the subclass or only add some new articles about the female persons when they're doing the editing work. So those 2 research is more on the data-driven decisions. And in the third work, we are more down to earth and we talk to the real persons. So as you can see that this is a totally different approach. And throughout those, I think throughout the past 1 year, and I've interviewing all of the Wikipedia editors across the whole world. And no matter which country they're coming from, what languages they're coming from, to be honest, I feel it's a totally different and a new experience for me because working on the data set is one thing and talking to the real person is a totally different thing. And they share me their usual approach, their challenges, their difficulties over their 20 years, 30 years of their time when dedicating to the editing work. So to be honest, I really moved by all of the editors who has talked to me and share their insights. And I would like to continue this research with Wikipedia so I could apply all my expertise and see whether I can build really something, a helpful tool to help them to, I would say, just attracting more editors joining this Wikipedia and also really solving their challenges. So as they mentioned to me, so gender gaps from my understanding based on all of the interviews is not a simple questions I read from all of the research papers. So when you talk to the real persons, I feel like there are more complex issues behind the gender gap. So I just want to do more efforts and more help towards this community. And that's pretty much about the highlights about our 3 research works. And if you have any suggestions and comments, feel free to talk to me. I'm happy to hear your insights. And also, if you are editors from the Wikipedia communities, just feel free to contact me. I'm happy to hear more of your insights. So about your challenges and how you encounter and solving the gender balancing process in your editing work. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tina. So as a reminder, we'll move to a Q&A portion now. So we've got about 10 minutes, and we'll open it up for questions, especially directed to Tina and Riham. So if you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and type in your questions, and Diego will help relay them to us in the room. And also to folks in the room, I'm giving an invitation to raise a hand or chime in with your questions here. I'll ask a question to get us started. Tina, I was curious, as you were looking, you presented these completeness percentages. I was wondering what, if any, surprises you had while looking at those breakdowns. Yeah, any surprises while you were doing that portion of the work?
Yeah, I feel like they are full of surprises everywhere. So previously I have predefined assumptions, but actually maybe it's the other way around. So there's I would say there are good things and also limitations we found throughout those data-driven approach. So I would say both male and females they need to have more improvements to the certain subclasses. It's not only about women. Even for men, they have some more things. We need to do more things to make sure everyone is fully acknowledged, and so to bridge the gender gap, I would say.
Thanks, Tina. Diego, over to you if there are any questions coming in.
Yes, we have one ask here. They're asking if you could recap the result of the research, like if can summarize again.
Diego, is that for Tina or Riham?
Riham.
Okay, so they're requesting just a really brief recap.
Yeah, I have presented on the slide that we launched a survey on LinkedIn Ads Campaign Manager. The results were that the campaign did reach people. There were more than 4,900 impressions. Impressions means people who click, who view the ad on LinkedIn Ads Manager. And then we have 25 clicks on the survey. The paper has presented on the Wiki workshop on 2023. So there's more details on the literature review and the methodology and the findings and also the cost. What we found as challenges, which we in which we hope that we recruit more or reach more people who click the ads and answer our survey, is we addressed on the next steps of the survey of the study design. I have presented this in the last few slides. So this is a summary of the results. I hope they have the findings are helpful, and please do reach me if you need a link to the paper or other information. Thank you.
Thanks, Riham. For those who may not be familiar as much with the project, I was wondering if you could sort of briefly comment on how you chose to start with LinkedIn as your starting point there. And then I see we have another question that Diego will relay.
Yeah, so the way that we started on LinkedIn is actually signing up to an account for the business side of LinkedIn, which is Campaign Manager. and then take it from there. We experimenting with different targeting options and different targeting criteria until we reach people on this platform. So there's a lot of tutorials of how you play with different options and how you sign up for the business campaign manager. This campaign manager is actually targeted for people who are interested to launch an advertisement on LinkedIn. So anybody who wants to use LinkedIn for launching an ad, he has to have an account on the campaign manager. And then taking it from there, the different marketing criteria, the different options of what kind of ad it is. It has to go through an approval process. It might take a few days and going back and forth with the LinkedIn support team. And then also approving all the targeting criteria. And if there is any additional requirements, such as in our sites, we had to create a dedicated website for a web page for our study. That also has to be addressed. But as the first step, signing up for the campaign manager and trying to experiment and play a little bit with targeting options, and also decide on what kind of advertisement you are looking for and what kind of people that you're looking for. So define the targeting campaigns. And also there are a lot of resources that they can be helpful. So yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Riham. So it sounds like there were some sort of a lot of technical considerations in that choice. Diego,
Exactly.
back to you. I think you have another question.
Yeah, we have a question from Christian Consoni. Greetings to Christian, and he's asking to Tina if you can elaborate more on the tool about gender detection, and if you think that Wikidata could be used to get ground truth information about gender.
Yes, we would say at this moment, we have been using Wikipedia APIs, DBpedia, Wikidata endpoints to query all of the data so we can have persistent data collection. So I would say Wikidata is only part of the sources we would get the information about the gender. So we need to use the consolidate all of the data all together so we can have the ground truth.
Thanks, Tina. Anything else from you, Diego? Anything? Okay. We might have time for just one final question, if there's any questions from here within the room. Oh, yes, Pablo, sorry, just saw your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, first, thank you to all the speakers for these very impressive talks. I have one question to Tina. I saw that one of your papers is co-authored by Rosie Stephenson Goodnight, who is a experienced Wikipedia editor who devoted to addressing the gender gap in Wikipedia. So I would like to know how is the experience about working on a research project, not only with academics, but also involving Wikipedians in this field. For sure, like he's a very special Wikipedian with a vast knowledge and good understanding of science, but in general, I'm very interested to promote these kind of collaborations happening in academia with Wikipedians.
Yeah, so this is a very nice question. To be honest, this is my first time to collaborate with the real community editors, so who has so many experience. So Rosie is a co-founder of Women in Red, and throughout, I think over almost a year, she has been helping me to communicating and connecting with the real editors community. So I can talk to the real person to understand what they're struggling, what's their process, what are their challenges. So what are they thinking when they're doing the editing work? So currently as a computer data scientist, so I can only see data, but I don't know what's the things behind it. So data is code, but people are real. So when you talk to them, it's totally different experiences. And especially those person who has devoting 20 years, 30 years in their life, daily life, without any pay to do the editing work. And they have so many challenges behind when they publishing a paper, editing a paper, saving the endangered papers. So that's the reason why we believe the third work we are currently working on is totally a new journey and a very special and precious experience for me. So in the end, I really would like to expose all of the insights I've been collecting with Wikipedia real persons, I would say editors communities. So I could see how we can really convert all of the insights as researchers. So we could really build something to help the real persons in these communities. So I would say as researchers, previously, all of the research papers, I feel they have different focus on totally different focus on what's the real person thinking behind it. So I feel it's a little bit two world. So as a real editors, they care about the things I have never imagined before, and I have never thought about that. So that's the reason I feel like I'm really moved by all of the person who talk to me. So I want to continue this journey and help them. Maybe just a little bit help. Maybe they can make a longer impact throughout the years.
Yeah, thanks for those reflections, Tina, and thanks for the question, Pablo. That's great to call out the benefits of these collaborations like that. All right. Well, I see we're at time now, so I just want to say a big thanks again to our presenters today, Douglas, Riham, and Tina. And also thanks to all the folks who joined us on YouTube and to those who asked questions there as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Kinneret to help us wrap up today.
Thank you, Eli. And I want to echo Eli in your thanks to the speakers and to everyone who are here today. So thank you, Douglas, Tina, Reham, and thank you to our audience. And I want to echo Tina in her thanks to all the Wikimedians out there working to close the gender gap. The Wikimedia Research Showcase was also made possible thanks to a great coordination team with my colleagues Eli and Diego. So thank you both. Eli, thank you for hosting today, and Diego, thank you for taking questions in the YouTube. Our next showcase in April will be about the motivations of Wikimedia editors. So we are looking forward to seeing you all there. And with that, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.